back for, I don't know how long this video will be. Either way, we'll load it up to one of the two channels. But I was looking at a passage concerning clouds and coverings, and the Lord's been taking me through my studies. I let her lead me wherever she wants. Now, I did this study on the 5th of July, and but on the evening of the 4th, Job 26 had come into my line of view, and I made a mental note that the next day I was going to take a look at Job 26 and read it. And so all I'm really going to do is I'm going to lead you through these passages that she really took me through, led me through. And then we'll maybe look at a couple other things that we wanted to take a look at. So Job 26 verse 9, I'm going to look at. It says, she covers, God, she, the Almighty One is she who gives life to all things. It was never a man that did that. And she says, you're without excuse not to understand that. I manifest it in the things that I created for your eyes to bear witness to. While male doesn't give life. And in the beginning, God says, come, let us make them in our image. God did not make a he with a male that births. God made a male and the female held the image of Mother God, who is the Spirit, who gives life. All right? Now that's clearly understood. She's also considered the firstborn of the entire creation as the daughter. And Mother says, Ephraim is my firstborn. And when she says Ephraim, she's referring to her daughter. All right? And she was last thing created. They tend to tell you, if you study, they'll say the creation order goes up as it goes higher and higher. Well, when they hit the woman, all of a sudden she bangs, she comes right down under the man. No, wrong. She's created in her mother's image. And as the last thing created, she is the firstborn, and she is promised restoration of the full dominion back, or full restoration of the dominion back, in the book of Micah, as we've took a look at. So these are the verses we're going to look at, though, concerning the covering, the false covering that Mother God promises she's going to pull back and expose. So Job 26, verse 9, we'll just run through them so that if you'd like to take a look at them, fine. If not, that's fine too. Maybe you'll just pick something up here. Job 26, verse 9, she covers the face of the full moon, spreading her clouds over it. Now the funny thing here is full moon is translated in the other passages. The King James Version and the HCSB version translates the full moon as throne in their versions. So it would read, she holdeth back the face of her throne and spreadeth her cloud upon it. So that you don't see her sitting on her throne is the understanding that you get. Verse 10, she marks out the horizon on the face of the waters for a boundary between light and darkness. Verse 11, the pillars of heaven quake, astounded at her rebuke. Verse 12, by her power. Yes, God is she. And people can't seem to get past the might of the man's physical might as being the image of God. God says, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit do I do these things. It is the Spirit that is the all-powerful one, and is the one that can empower these bodies, all right? Now, when that Spirit came off of us daughters, we really lost our power in many, many ways, and we looked at that in another video, so I can't hit at it right now. But it says, by her power, she churned up the sea. By her wisdom, she cut Rahab to pieces. Now, we know who cut Rahab to pieces, and that was the right hand. And that's called Daughter Zion. She goes by wisdom. She goes by Jerusalem. She goes by Israel. She goes by servant. She goes by Ephraim. She goes by firstborn. These are all names for her, the feminine aspect of the Godhead, because we do have male and female that was created in the very beginning as the image of the Godhead, which then is also why God says you're without excuse not to understand it. And in Hebrews it says the tabernacle above reflects the one below. Well, sorry, but all I ever got told was the tabernacle of a he. And you go look up angel or messenger, it's masculine, yet they tell us that the angels are sexless. Well, then it shouldn't be a masculine, sorry. So we know that we've been lied to, and we're coming up on the veil that she states she's going to pull back and reveal her throne and her truth. All right? But we'll keep reading here. So she says it was the one that cut Rahab to pieces, and we identified who cut Rahab to pieces by reading the passages in Isaiah 51, Isaiah 52, and in Psalm 89. And it'll tell you it was the right hand known as the daughter of Zion that cut Rahab to pieces, which is an allegory to, again, this false government that's been established, okay? So verse 13, by her breath the skies became fair, her hand pierced the gliding, fleeing, crooked serpent. You can put whichever word in there you'd like. They're all mentioned in the Hebrew word when you look it up. Verse 14, behold, these are but the fringes of her ways. How faint is the word we hear of her. Well, we don't even hear whisper of her, really. Who can understand her mighty thunders? Those are the thunders that utters the truth that will actually save you. Out of the book of Revelation, that John is then told to seal up and not utter, but then he is told to go take the book that is still opened up in the angel's hands as standing on the water in the land, and to eat that book, which is sweet on his tongue but is bitter in his stomach. So it's actually the word of man that tastes good on his tongue. Oh, it tastes so sweet, but it's really what's killing us. It's cobra's venom in the stomach. It's wormwood. It's the law of man that is killing us. It's not designed to lead us into life, which is why we're actually having judgment fall on us right now. Most Christians seems totally confused. They're looking longer, they're looking harder at waiting for a man to come and rescue them, and yet here we are, in a great judgment that appears to be falling on the entire world, and they haven't linked it back to the fact that we've been taught a lie. Now, we discussed what the truth was. We know Christ was a real man, and we know, I believe, that he was crucified. I do not, however, believe he was crucified for the reasons that they speak on. He was crucified under Old Testament law, which again we're going to get to that in a minute, which we're told how iniquity is shaped. Iniquity is shaped under the law. When we get investigating that, we know that iniquity is shaped under the Torah law, which actually becomes the foundation for our civic and civil laws. Because we discussed in our videos how that actually fed out to the four corners of the globe. When fallen Adam began to, he built a stronghold known as the harlot spirit Babylon, which means a harlot spirit that was feminine, the spirit's feminine, that would bow to his lies and exalt him as God. Well, that lie is not the law. It can't deliver you. A lie can't deliver you. And this is what we're under judgment for. And God speaks of her judgment, I believe, in Ezekiel 19 as well as Ezekiel 24 or Isaiah 24. And her judgment, and it is her judgment that comes up in there. And she speaks of the threshing of the nations, all right? And it's all about this lie, this religious lie that we hold in our mouth as guile. And it links us all back to that 144,000 daughters that are going to stand up, known as the remnant of Israel, known as the daughters of Zion, with no guile in their mouth. This is what brings on the Antichrist, okay? Now, I can't get into all that. But here it says, who can understand her mighty thunders? So John was told to seal it up, Daniel was told to seal it up, and Paul, when you understand the allegory to that burning serpent that rose up out of the fire and bit him, well, that's another name for your seraphim, a burning or fiery serpent. And that's what bit him up out of the fire, and then he supposedly shook it off. But then we're also told of another strange incident where Paul was took to the third heaven and then told not to utter what he saw there. So again, we have three here men that saw the truth and then was told, no, you can't speak on it. And the reason why men can't speak on it is because it's not their place to. It is the women's place to speak on this. And in particularly, a group of women that are called out by Mother God herself to hold her spirit, which means to hold her spirit means to hold her teachings of the true theology or the true law of God. And we're going to look at what those are because Christ upheld them. That's who he died for, upholding her law. And he points you to her. He says, you can blaspheme the Son of Man, but you're not going to blaspheme the Holy Spirit when she rises up. And that's a reference to the daughters of Zion, known as the remnant of Israel, who were promised that they would not only inherit Israel as their seed, this time they would also inherit the Gentiles, which just happens to be where they were cast out, which then takes us to the understanding of that verse in Jeremiah 30 or 31, I can't remember which chapter, where it says, a strange thing is seen in the earth, a woman shall encompass a man. Well, the man took control of what we call Mount Zion or Mount Jerusalem, which it isn't, because in Galatians 4 it tells us that this Jerusalem, the one that's here on earth that we know of as Jerusalem, is in Arabia. It is not in the true Jerusalem. Well, Mother's true Israel or true Jerusalem is established by a belief system. It is established by a teaching. And when these daughters let go of those truths, she casts them out into the fields of the Gentiles where they'll be reborn. Now, there was a certain group that did not hearken to those teachings and was cast out. She said, leave. This is not your rest, she tells these daughters. And then there was a group that were cast out. But then, because you see, the men married harlots. They did not marry their own women where they were to find their own doctrine from, which is testified to in Proverbs chapter 5. And we're told the bride is a garden of fountain sealed in Song of Songs 4:12. We know, according to the scriptures, he, in a sense, and again, forgive me for saying, he pissed in his own water, he crapped in his own water, and that means he defiled the word of God. That's what it means, which was on these daughters' lips. That's where they were to receive the truth from. And when they cast her down, they didn't want her anymore. They said, razz her to the ground, we'll build our own stronghold. And that's precisely what they did. They took wives from the surrounding Adamic nations. The men in Israel took wives from the surrounding Adamic nations that would hearken or told them laws that actually tickled their ears and would build them up as mighty men on earth, the great giants of the earth. And then the real women that were to be their wives, they cast them out. They didn't want nothing to do with them. And they did everything in their power to really get them out of existence. And so they built their own stronghold. That's why you get the allegory to a woman surrounding a man. He took control of what was rightfully hers. But in the end, she claims everything. That's what's going down here right now. They think they're coming to put a yoke on her neck. Yoke is man-made law. Well, if there's one thing the man-made law has always done, it is to yoke woman under him. You can testify to that with your own eyes, which God tells you to do. God says, open your physical eyes. To get a link to the spiritual realm, you're going to have to take a look around you with your physical eyes to get a better understanding of things. And that's one thing they really teach in man-made theology not to do. Oh, come on. It's in here. All of it. Everything you need to know is in here. Whatever you do, don't pay attention to what's out here. And yet God says, open your eyes and take a look around you. What do you see? I manifested it in the things that I created for your eyes to bear witness to. And you believe in a he that gives life. And they come up with these contrivances, these contrived little narratives that where they try to teach you that, yes, it is a man that birthed you, and yes, it is a man that created you, and to really get your eyes off of the facts, right? Which we're told to do, because it speaks of the eye as being your fountain of knowledge. And if you don't use your eyes to look around you a little bit, you're never going to understand anything. But it also tells us that that daughter, that spirit, when they rise up out of the dust of the earth, as attested to in Isaiah 29, Mother says, I hear a familiar spirit as of one that speaketh out of the dust of the earth. And she's talking about her daughters. She's talking about her daughters of Zion. And if you think this is an easy testing, then you ain't read the Bible, because Isaiah 28, she says, I lay in Zion, they've tried and tested Zion. They're going to throw everything at you they can think to throw at you to make you crack and to dismiss the truth that the Spirit has poured into you. And like I said, I can see them throwing every contrivance at me that they can think to throw at me. Well, that's called being tried and tested. Well, I can tell you one thing. I'm too far gone on this truth to ever turn back. I know the truth. I'm not going to turn back to the vomit which is spoken of, I believe, in, again, Isaiah 28 or 29, where the high priest fills the table with vomit, spews vomit. That's lie, man-made lie. Ezekiel's told to eat man dung. Well, the reason why he's told to eat man dung is because it links you back to Balaam, to what the men were doing to the word. All right? It's all allegorical, which again they tell you not to do. They tell you don't understand it allegorical, it's literal. And yet in Galatians 4:24, these two women are an allegory to two covenants. Malachi 2 testifies to what the two covenants are, and that these women do indeed represent the Spirit. So you can say, she's this, she's that. Serpent is also a positive allegory. You got the burning, firing seraphim, a serpent. It's an allegory to cunning women in a very smart, wise way that were to lead the people. The men of Israel rejected them. We know that that was really the only way to claim that you were an Israelite was through the woman's seed, not through the man's seed. And so what they really did, or what they think they were so clever in doing, was to cast off the way that they could claim to be an Israelite, and married in harlot wives who would teach a lying theology, the one that tickled their ears anyway, and claim to be Israel. And that's your false foundation that fed out to the four corners of the world, when the real Israelites, the daughters, were cast out into the fields of the Gentiles, which was promised that their birthright would be enlarged in Isaiah 49, that she would not only claim the Israelites, that she would now claim the Gentiles as well. And that was a promise by Mother God, where she says, cast the 30 pieces of silver, she says to the daughter Zion, Zechariah 11, cast those 30 pieces of silver and I'll enlarge in your birthright. That's more or less what she's saying. And what she meant by that is you'll not only claim the Israelites, you'll now claim the Gentiles. And then we're told in Isaiah 27 that she will not only, that she'll fill the world with her seed. And the seed that they're talking about is the woman's seed, Israel. And she claims it, it's hers. So back to the covering and to Rahab, that we know was cut to pieces by the right hand of God, which is the daughter Zion. And this is what we find in Isaiah 25 verse 7. And she will swallow up on this mountain, the covering that is the cast over all the peoples. That's the lie. The veil that is spread over all nations. All right? Every nation has had this lie covered over. We're covered over with a lie. With a lying religious theology that teaches a he as God and subjugates the righteous spirit under those lies. All right? What does Zephaniah 3:8 say? Therefore, wait for me, declares the Lord. All right? For the day I will stand up to testify. This is the daughter Zion saying, I'm going to testify to the truth because I was there and watched it all go down. Because you're looking at her as the eternal spirit. She's the one that was, is, and is to come. All right? That's why you see her as the eternal spirit from the beginning to the end. She's the Alpha, she's the Omega. The teacher man is. No, he didn't. Christ didn't teach that. Christ says, you can blaspheme me, but her you're not going to blaspheme. You want to know why? Because she's the only one that give life to you. And he died upholding her laws. And we're going to prove that by linking a passage from the New Testament to the Old Testament that absolutely testifies to the law that Christ upheld. And it says, know ye not, he that is joined to a harlot is a harlot. Christ was not joined to a harlot. He was joined to the righteous daughter Zion, who the first Adam rashed to the ground, did not want a covenant with. All right? He says, this is who my covenant is with. And so, what does it say in Zephaniah 3:8 again? Therefore, wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day I will stand up to testify. I have decided to assemble the nations and to gather the kingdoms and to pour out my wrath on them, all my fierce anger. The whole world will be consumed by the fire of my jealousy. Now, if you want to go in and pull up Psalm 50, she says, and you have to get your genders correct because they're going to write everything a he. Because the he's took control of the writing of the word, and we know it's supposed to be written on our heart. This ought to testify to you whether it has the feeling of truth from God or life from God. Because if you believe you should be subjected to a man, and a he gives you life, and that God lawed, when God put woman in this creation as the birth, as the life giver, as the one that forms the clay in her womb, that you tell God's a liar, and you say these written words on a page that tickles man's ears and tastes like honey on his tongue is the truth, but yet you can't feel that truth in your heart, and the love of a son willing to die to uphold those truths out of such a great love that a man would have for his spouse. You can't see that truth in that. You believe woman is less. You believe she's under a man, as testified to in the written word of man. And he says, this is from God. Well, God says, I've been forced to mingle my words, but I want you to understand that there is the sealed up truth in there to be revealed at the end of days, when my daughters determine to pick their heads up and begin to return back to me, just as the Shulamite testifies to that she does indeed return back to Mother God, and to the truths that has everybody in equality. God says, I'm no respecter of person. My laws are laws of fairness and of equity. I do not favor men over women. I do not say that women cannot hold my word in their mouth and teach it. That's a lie again from man-made religious theology. And so she says, allow me to stand up and testify. And she also says, I have determined to pour my wrath out, gather the nations together and to pour my wrath out. And we know that links us to Micah 4:13, where she says, daughter Zion will thresh the nations. She is the one promised to thresh the nations, and yet God says, let me stand up to testify. I have decided to assemble the nations. So I actually wrote them down. Let me go over and read them. Psalm 50 verse 20, thou sittest and speakest against thy sister. Now they don't have sister there. This is what it should actually be rendered once you get your deeper understandings of the gender, male and female, and their particular part in the Godhead. Thou slanderest thine own mother's daughter. Now we're talking about the first Adam, all right, and what he did. He slandered his own sister, all right, in front of his mother, Mother God. These things thou hast done, and I kept silence. And she did indeed keep silent. She was, I think, dumbstruck, and there is a verse where she says, that they lay so many things to her charges that she don't even know how to respond. Now, the one that's speaking there is the righteous spirit, the daughter that is indwelt by this righteous spirit. And after he points at her and he says, her fault, her fault, her fault, look at what she did. She's playing the harlot. Look at the things she did. She just sits there stunned in silence, and she doesn't answer for a very, very long time. And the Bible does tell us why she remained silent, to allow him to entrap himself, to ensnare himself in his own lies. That's what this all leads up to. And then her standing up in testimony, which you get in Zephaniah 3:8, where she says, therefore wait for me, declares the Lord. This is the daughter Zion. For the day I will stand up to testify, and I have decided to assemble the nations and to gather the kingdoms and to pour out my wrath on them, all my fierce anger. The whole world will be consumed by the fire of my jealousy. Now, when we go to, all right, I didn't finish reading this. She says, I kept silent. You thought I was just like you. I will reprove you and state the case in order. That means lay the charge, set my accusation, set them in order. That takes you to the Female Assembler in Ecclesiastes 12. Before your eyes. Verse 22. Understand this. Consider this. Mark this. You who forgot God. Or I will tear you apart, and there will be no one to rescue or deliver you. The one who offers thanksgiving as a sacrifice glorifies me. To the one who orders her way or his way rightly, I will show the salvation of God. Then if you go to Micah 4, verse 13. But now many, okay, we'll start at verse 11, sorry. But now many nations have assembled against you, saying, let her be defiled. You see how you're putting this together? And let her be defiled, and let us feast our eyes on Zion, the daughter Zion. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord, or understand her plan. For she has gathered them like sheaves to the threshing floor. Verse 13. Rise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will give you horns of iron and hooves of brass, bronze, to break to pieces many people. Then you will devote their gain to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of all the earth. So, it lines up with the Lord that stands up in Zephaniah 3:8, and she is determined to pour her wrath, which also takes you to Psalm 110. The Lord that sits to Christ's number, which is 113's right hand, will stand up and strike through kings in the day of wrath. Now, when we go to, okay, where are we heading now? Let me just get my thoughts here a little bit in order. Okay, so those are all part and parcel, I believe, of the same idea. This idea of a covering, of a veil being pulled back, of the darkness, the lie of this religious theology that is the false foundation that became the yoke on our neck. All right, she's getting ready to pull it back, and she says, "You're going to see me sitting on my throne. You're going to see me sitting there." And it is her that is appointed the threshing of the nations. And otherwise, you're on a very slippery slope, which is precisely what God says the powers of darkness has done. They've laid out for themselves a slippery path of darkness. What that means is they can't address all the problems that arises from their lying theology. Their answer to when you can't understand their theology is found in, let me get this here. It's found in Isaiah 29. Yeah, I believe. What does it say? It is in verse. Nope, it's not in. Well, let me look a little bit more here. They say, hand the book off to one who is learned. And yet they can't tell you what it means, right? They'll say, there's just no way we can know what it means. But that's what their slippery, crooked path, their lie has led to. They're unable to answer these deeper questions, which is what the daughters of Zion are able to do. They're able to answer the deeper questions. I think it must be in 28. I'm not finding it. Sorry about this. It's in one of these chapters. I should have had it up. I'm sorry. But more or less they hand the book off, it says, and ask one to interpret it, and they more or less say, well, we don't know what it's saying. We don't know what it means. And they simply have no reason why they don't know what it means. God is not going to lay out a path for you that you can't follow. God's going to lay you out a very straightforward path. One that you can even see with your own eyeballs. It is male and female on this earth. It is not male, male, male. God's power is not defined by muscle. God's power is defined by the Spirit. That's the first mistake you make when you look at male and female. That was what made the lie, that's what makes their lies so feasible in a sense. But yet God testifies to the fact that her power comes from the Spirit. It does not come from this physical body. God says the physical body adds nothing to me. It is my Spirit that is all powerful, right? So to look at man and say, well, obviously he's the image of God, that's a lie. It's the Spirit that makes you the image of God. That's why Christ was the image of God, because he testified to her truth. And that's what resurrecting is, her truth. And we're going to, again, look at that passage. But man, I don't know why I can't find this. It is yet a little. It's in one of these two passages. I'm sorry it takes so much time on it. But now we're going to go to linking Christ from the Old Testament to the New Testament and to the law that he upheld. Now, I was always taught that Christ upheld the Torah. Well, if Christ fulfilled the Torah, then he was absolute sin in that sense, if he fulfilled the Torah. The Torah is the shaping of sin. Right? It says law is how iniquity is shaped. Well, the law that shaped the iniquity is Torah. All right? And we're going to prove that in a minute. All right? We've done it many times. Nobody just wants to hear it. I don't know what the problem is. Brainwashed, unable to reason. Maybe a little bit of work goes into it instead of having a man-made theology plopped into your lap, and you don't want to have to go out and search anything out. And there's a lot that do that, and it tickles men's ears. I don't really know what it does to the women, because it certainly ain't tickling yours. But it says in, let me see, Luke 13. Watch what Christ does in Luke 13. And this shows you what a man was instructed to do to his mother's law. And that was that he was, and to his sister's law, he was to testify by following it. And he followed it to the letter, Christ did. Watch what he says. Verse 10, Luke 13. And he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath day. And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself. And when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmities. And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. It doesn't say she glorified him. It says she glorified God. Verse 14, and the ruler of the synagogue, watch this, answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, There are 6 days in which men ought to work. In them therefore come and be healed, and not on the Sabbath day. Right? And they're really indignant, I think beyond indignant, because it was a woman and not a man. It was bad enough. You know, it would have been bad enough had it been a man, but a woman? Come on, not a woman. Verse 15, the Lord then answered him and said, Thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his own ox or his ass from the stall, and lead him away to water? Now, where do we get this law of God that Christ was following here? All right? And you're not going to find it in the Torah. You're not going to find it anywhere in the Torah. You know where you're going to find it? And Mother God's response to the men who were trying to exalt their man-made law over her own laws. That's what they were trying to do. She says, Behold, ye fast for strife and debate, and to smite with the fist of wickedness. Ye shall not fast as ye do this day, to make your voice to be heard on high. So if you go in and you read Isaiah 58, you're going to come to the understanding of why men were making the laws that they were making. And it was all about exalting themselves and making money. All right? That's found in the first 4 verses of Isaiah 58. But this is what she says to the men. Is it such a fast that I have chosen, a day for a man to afflict his soul? Which is what they taught us. Oh, you better ask forgiveness on Sunday. You better bow your head down, and you better weep and cry and go on and ask for forgiveness that you're a sinner. But watch what God says. Watch what God says. Christ testifies to this. And everybody misses it, I guess. Is it to bow down his head as a bulrush, and to spread sackcloth and ashes under him? Will thou call this a fast and an acceptable day to the Lord? Well, they do. Right? Watch this. Verse 6. Is not this the fast that I have chosen? To loose the bands of wickedness, and to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every burden, every yoke. What yoke? What yoke? What's the yoke in the Bible? Let's read what they say in Psalm 2. So this was the yoke that Christ was actually healing the woman from in Luke 13, right? And he says, and ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan had bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? So what was the Sabbath day? Is this not my Sabbath, she says? Is not this the fast that I have chosen, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, and to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke? Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out to thy house? When thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh. So if you go in and you read this chapter, and there's other chapters as well that testifies to the true laws of God, that the Torah completely goes against. All right? It's not the Noahide. Somebody's got Noahide. It's not the Noahide. It is the Torah laws written by the hand of men, wherein sin was shaped. They crucified Christ because he would not uphold their man-made Torah laws. And they crucified him because he did uphold her laws, Mother God's laws. Know ye not, he that is joined to a harlot is a harlot. They upheld the harlot law, the law of Babylon, whom they built as their stronghold, because she would teach his lying theology and stay under his bondage of the law. All right, the yoke of the law. Christ come and was joined to the daughter Zion. He upheld her laws. These are her teachings, straight from Mother God's mouth. All right, in whose image we are to be reflecting on this earth. So here in Isaiah 58, she tells you what her Sabbath day ought to look like. Christ walked this in his life. He healed the woman on the Sabbath. How many did he feed? What else did he do on these days? He did everything that the Spirit of Mother God told you about. Told you was her Sabbath. Told you was her fast and what it was about. Now, watch what it says here in Proverbs 6:21. My son, it says, keep your fathers. No, commandment here is feminine. So it's obviously saying your sisters, because we got mother in the next verse. They want to completely eliminate the woman other than a mother. But the daughter don't mean nothing. My son, keep your sisters' commandments. That's who he was supposed to keep. How do we know that? Because of Proverbs chapter 5. And where the man was to receive his waters from, his doctrines from. Then it says in Song of Songs 4:12, thy wife, thy spouse, thy sister is a garden sealed, a fountain sealed. That's reference to the doctors that you are to receive the word of truth from. Your sister. Alright? And what does it say? My son, keep your mother's commandment, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. You see, she teaches her mother's law. That's what she teaches. She's made in her image. Verse 21, bind them always upon your heart, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will guide you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. When you wake, they will speak to you. Now watch. We know that this is what the kings did. They cut off her laws. They cut off her commandments. Why do the heathen rage? Psalm 2. And the people imagine a vain thing. Verse 2. The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against her anointed one. That's the Holy One of Israel, daughters on. Let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. You see what they were doing? They were writing their own laws. Galatians 4 testifies to this fact. What does it say in Galatians 4? And we'll finish up. I'm done with this, okay? Because we've rehashed and rehashed. It says, verse 24, which things, that means these two women, are an allegory, for these are the two covenants, the one from Mount Sinai, which gendereth to bondage, which is Hagar. For this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia, and answereth to Jerusalem. So, what Jerusalem is answering? The one in Arabia, it says, which now is and is in bondage with her children. What came from Mount Sinai? Mosaic law, which is what we call the Torah, which we say is the law of God. No, it ain't. She testifies in Isaiah 58 that those weren't her laws. And then the Bible tells us, will the throne of God have fellowship with the throne of iniquity of the law? I forget how it's stated. I stated in one of my videos. Maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. But she testifies to the fact that the Torah is not her law. She testifies in passages like Isaiah 58, and there is another one I used to mention it, now I can't remember where it was, where she specifies that these are her laws. Christ walked those laws every day of his life. And so he was not joined to the harlot, Babylon, which was what the Pharisees was joined to. They wanted him to teach their man-made laws that would subjugate a woman under a man. And yet Mother says your job is to take off those yoke and those bondage off of everyone. You remove them. She gave us the 10 Commandments. She gave us the way that we were to live. Have no other God before you. And yet they took a harlot spirit and built her up so they could write their own man-made laws and play God. Christ testifies to who he was joined to, and it was the daughter Zion. And it was not many. A woman, a wife, a bride is not many. He says, my spouse, my sister, in Song of Songs, chapter 4. What does it say? Verse 12. What does he say? A garden enclosed is my sister, singular. My spouse, singular. A spring shut up, a fountain sealed. You see, that's the law he testified to, hers. That's what he died upholding. And it was the Torah law that crucified him. And sin, we know, is shaped under that law, man-made law that puts a yoke on our neck. And I was going to read Ezekiel 19, and I was going to go through and show you the genders. This is about the queen that she would have raised, Ezekiel 19. But I think I'm out of time. Yeah, I'm pretty much out of time. We'll leave it at that. And I don't know. I hope that there's some clarity found in the videos that I make. I know I'm coming up on an end. I know I said I was going to do a video on particular topics. I may not get to them. I'm feeling really weary and tired, and I think for obvious reasons. There's a lot of things going on, but I know what's taking place is the threshing of the nation, and that Mother is getting ready to roll back the heavens like a scroll and to show you who really sits on that throne. We know that there was 3 thrones shown in Psalm 110, and it gives the number 3068. That is Mother's number. She is the Almighty God. To her right sits Christ, 113, who is a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. That makes him a kingly priest, and means that he is able to go into the glory, which is then represented by his sister, his spouse, that sits to his right, which is daughter Zion, the rod of his strength, which is called the stronghold of the man Judah, that Solomon then saw fit to have torn down so he could build a harlot. And we've discussed this in so many of our videos, and we've backed it up. It's a study to show thyself approved unto God, and to bring on the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is about the controversy of Zion. The controversy of Zion was the dividing of the pleasant land into the 2 covenants that we see spoken of in Galatians 4, and we also see them spoken of in Malachi 2. And she is your spirit. She was breathed into the man. She's what gave him life. All right? And so few are able to reason out the truth. And yet Mother God says, you're without excuse. You're not going to stand before my throne and say you didn't know about me and that I was the life giver. You're not going to say that, because I manifested it in this very creation. And we made you in our image, male and female. It was not he. And you can believe their lie all you want and think that you're going to get away scot-free. And yet she says, I have stood up. I have testified to the truth. The way she testifies to her truth is through her daughters. Well, I'm one of them doing it. I can tell you that. And my eyes are open. And she says, Therefore, wait for me, declares the Lord, for the day I will stand up to testify. I have decided to assemble the nations and to gather the kingdoms and to pour out my wrath on them in all my fierce anger. So that's the threshing of the nations. That's what that is. Which we're told is daughter Zion that will do that. Which sits to Christ's right hand, which is the strength of his rod out of Zion. And she is the power. She's the scepter. She's Shiloh. The scepter between Judah's feet will not depart until Shiloh comes. That's she. That's akin to the Shulamite. And though she's peaceful when you receive her truths, but she's also the one that's going to cut you away when you reject her. And that's testified to in passages like Psalm 110 and other passages. And it's just a matter of letting the Spirit lead you and getting away from men who, and women who just can't seem to let this lie go. And God says, it doesn't matter. You're going to be judged. And I think that's what we're hitting on right now. That's what's coming to pass right now. You're under a lie, and you just can't let it go. You just can't let it go. And yet it testifies to the fact where the dead are trapped. They are trapped in the valley of the shadow of darkness. And only when they see these daughters' lights shining, known as Israel, the remnant of Israel, will they be free to find the truth out. And that's we did that in a video. The dead is told to go towards the light. Also, I'm just going to mention briefly, I watched a movie. I watched it a while ago. I got some of the allegories. This was quite a while ago. I got a few of them then, but I got so many more now. And it was Pay the Ghost was the name of the movie. And they speak of the crone weeping for her children. Well, they're just mocking Rachel, right? Because it says Rachel weeps for her children who are no more. Now, this is the interesting allegory they show you. They show you that these children are taken and they're trapped in a spot by this crone. Well, they're trapped, and there's a bridge that can only be opened one day out of the year, which is Halloween, of course. And then they show you the symbology. I forget the name, but it's a moon in the middle with two crescents on the outside, which it's interesting because I find that our the one that if you don't put a picture on your, what identifies you, they'll give you half of that image, right? They'll give you the circle with a crescent moon. Well, the lady in that movie tells you that this crescent, the left crescent is the maiden, the full moon represents the mother, and the right crescent represents the crone, or the old lady that was weeping for her children. Well, Rachel was weeping for her children. Where does it say she was weeping for her children? See, she was weeping for them in the high places, because they are no more. So, the interesting thing here is what I saw in that symbology, and this is what it looked like. Let me see if I got a pen. I got a pen somewhere. Oh, I thought I had a pen. Did I write it down? I think I put it down anyway, somewhere. Let's see. This image. It's not there. Wow, what did I do with my pen? I'm sorry, I'm so disorganized. I got a pen somewhere. Well, I guess I don't. I'm sorry. Anyway, I hope you can understand. It's a full moon and two crescents on the outside, and they're all connected. And he goes in, and only the children that are taken the prior year can be rescued, supposedly, is the storyline. But none of it adds up, because he goes into the open bridge to retrieve these lost children. Not in the symbology. That would not be the correct retrieval. It would be her restoring the children. Because she says, I must restore that which I took not away. She says that in the scriptures. And it is the maiden, made in the mother's image. This is what it looks like. That must teach the true theology that will deliver the children that are walking in darkness. Alright? So this is what she's so angry about. We turned and we began to teach a lying theology. So this full moon represents, I think, a gateway that opens once a year. It's interesting because I also found another passage, I shouldn't speak on this, in Psalm 81, and I strongly see the festival of our 15th in it. I'm just going to read you the verse. And it's because the translation is off on it that will cause you to think differently about it. Psalm 81 verse 3, sound the ram's horn at the new year and when the moon is full. Well, the new moon is not the full moon. On the day of our festival. You know who I think is speaking here? I think it is the daughters of Zion who had their sanctuary tore down. And I think their queen is promised to be birthed into this world on Av 15th. And the way that that queen is birthed is through these daughters having the glory come upon them, which is Mother God, right? And we're her inheritance. But it says, and I truly see that as Av 15th. And I'll just give a little detail here, and I know I'm just blathering on here for some people, is that if you go in and you pull up the Greek number, is it the Greek or is it the Hebrew number? 227, all right? And it means at that time, at the appointed time, or at that time. The interesting thing is Av 15th, or August 15th, is the 227th day of the year, right? It may be a weak connection, but it's a very interesting one. And it's amazing because in the notes on that particular verse, this is the phrase that caught me. But in 2 Chronicles 7:10, the same word is used for the 23rd day. Hence, it is supposed to denote the whole time of the moon's waning from the full moon. So this year's, if we go from the full moon this year, that's going to hit on Av 15th, that's August 5th. And if you follow it through from the waning of the full moon, when you hit Elul 1, that's going to hit on, interestingly enough, August 21. Well, that's quite fascinating, isn't it? I think it's very fascinating detail, because that really corresponds to, doesn't it, the eclipse? And Elul 1 is, what do they claim it really means? My beloved, something my beloved, I forget now. It's been so long since I studied the month of Elul. But I think it means the queen is in her field. And it tells us to call on the glory of God. She says, call on me and the glory of the Lord will come in unto thee. And I think it's these firstborns, the daughters of Zion. They have been handpicked. They have been known. And the glory comes to them. And it is linked to this being their festival, I think. This is their big festival day, Av 15. And it may follow through. It states in Jewish encyclopedia that it is promised to be their greatest festival of all. And I think it's because it has to do with the appearance of the queen of the earth as the true ruler, daughter Zion of the earth, with her laws in their mouth, and the commandments that Christ bore witness and testimony to and died for. He pointed you to her. He said, you can blaspheme the Son and get away with it, but my Spirit, who is the daughter Zion, you're not going to blaspheme her and get away with it, as testified to by herself. And Zephaniah 3:8, she says, I am determined to gather the nations and to judge them. And that's what's going on right now. And you can say, no it ain't. Oh yes it is. You ain't even met the feminine yet. Most won't even admit to it, though we exist here on earth. So I think it's about reasoning some things out, and using your eyeballs as well to reason things out with just your physical view. And she says that's going to lead you to understand a lot of things in the spiritual realm. And so there's my video. Sorry I babbled on. I wanted it to be more concise. I apologize. I am tired today. I am feeling weary. I think many of us are. Ask for forgiveness for that. And I hope the Lord blesses you all, particularly my sisters. And I say my sisters, I want my brothers blessed greatly with this truth. But if the sisters don't pick it up, then we're in deep trouble. But it does testify to the fact in the scripture that she does pick it up. How long it takes, I don't know. But it does. It absolutely has to be these sisters that pick this truth up. So I absolutely hope and pray that my sisters are blessed abundantly with this truth. And by that, by extension, our brothers will be greatly blessed by us having this truth. And so I thank you for watching my video, and I hope you all have a really nice day.